Hello guys, it is me again, it's HorrorFan34, and welcome back to another video, and welcome back to the series of reviews for the Jason films. Now we are getting on to the last film that was actually in the released by Paramount, and of course that review is going to be on this. Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Now, this one was released in 1989, directed by Rob Hedden, or Rob Hedden. I think that's, I don't know how you say his name, but Rob Hedden, I don't know how you say his last name, but basically Friday the 13th Part 8 takes place right after where Part 7 left off at, and Jason's at the bottom of the lake, and basically he gets brought back, and he kills these two people on this boat. And basically, this is the last film that was in Camp Crystal Lake. And basically, the whole idea is that this, I believe it's a high school graduation on this cruise ship that's going to New York City. And then Jason stows aboard on the boat and starts killing people there. Now, the title is very, very misleading. I'm gonna get onto it, but before I get onto that, I think this is a decent installment of the franchise, but it's definitely probably the weakest one of the Paramount films. But not to say it's a bad movie, you know what I mean? But it's just like the title itself is a little bit misleading, because I know there was a lot of problems with the budget behind this, because apparently the reason why Paramount sold the rights. I think they sold the rights or something like that to New Line Cinema, because what ended up happening is that this was the film that was the lowest grossing of the franchise of the Paramount films. And basically what ended up happening is that the marketing was kind of misleading in a way, because they couldn't really film too much in New York itself because they didn't really have much of a budget. So basically, the majority of this film is on this boat that's going to New York City, and basically when there is actually like scenes like in New York, Times Square and things like that. But I know originally that the director Rob Hedden was going to have scenes at Madison Square Garden and the Statue of Liberty and things like that. He planned on having a lot more scenes in New York. But there was only a select few of scenes that were in New York, because most of the shots, when they're filmed in the city locations, it's actually filmed in Vancouver, because like they said, they couldn't really film much in New York. But so in a way, the title's a little bit misleading. Especially there's this one teaser trailer where it shows New York City, and this piano music's playing in the background, do 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 do, and you hear a car beeping, and do, and this real soothing music, and then Jason turns around, and you see all these close-ups of people screaming, there's a hot dog vendor guy, a homeless guy, and things like that. But none of that stuff's really that was a teaser. But the problem was, though, during the production, they couldn't really film too much in New York, so in a way and on top of that too, there's a lot of things about this film that it's kind of funny that doesn't make any sense. The boat is in Camp Crystal Lake, and then for some reason it goes into the ocean and to New York City. It was in Camp Crystal Lake, and it's going into the ocean. How does that make any sense whatsoever? And the whole ending was kind of weird. With Jason getting turned back into a little boy, and just kind of a weird ending. And on top of that too, not to say it's a bad movie. There are some stuff about it that are pretty decent. I will say Jensen Daggett, who plays the female lead in this, probably the weakest female lead of the films. I think Amy Steele was far better, Laura Park Lincoln, Dana Kimmel, Adrienne King, Kimberly Beck, things like that. But not to say Jensen Daggett did a bad job. And of course, there's some. And, Kelly Hu is actually in this. Kelly Hu is really the only person in this film that went on to do much of anything. She wound up having a pretty big career. Kelly Hu. And granted, like some of the death scenes in this are not really, or some of the weaker ones, like compared to some of the other ones. Not to mention, but before I get onto that, like the ones that really stand out to me in this movie for the death scenes is like, of course, V.C. Dupree as Julius, who's like a boxer, and he's like boxing Jason on the roof when they're in the city, and he gets tired out. He's like, okay, give me your best shot, and then Jason just punches him and he knocks his head off into a dumpster. That's a fun one. And I'm trying to think of another really fun one. Of course, the guy gets dumped into the barrel of acid and things like that. Basically, in the story is that you have the character of Jensen Daggett. I believe it's her uncle is one of the characters, and you basically find out in like a flashback, like he was a jerk off to her, and there's a point where they have a flashback of when she was a kid, and he threw her into Camp Crystal Lake because she like he wanted her to learn how to swim, and she saw Jason as a kid in the lake, and things like that. So, and you know, there's like one death scene with a guitar, things like that. And Kelly Hu's death scene is pretty weak because all it really is just she gets choked and strangled. Not really much. You know, like I'm saying, it's not really like when I compare it to like the other death scenes in the other films, like the guy with walking on his hands and he gets the machete between the legs, or Crispin Glover with the corkscrew, or Kevin Bacon the arrow through the neck. You have the character of Annie in Part 1 with the axe to her face. It just, you know, Part 8 really doesn't have some of the best deaths. I mean, there was a couple good ones, like, you know, V.C. Dupree and things like that. And also, one of the things that I found really funny about Part 8 is that Jason does a lot, and I mean a lot, of teleporting in this movie. He teleports everywhere. So I think that's kind of funny. And Kane Hodder, once again, does come back as Jason. Kane Hodder, once again, does a good job as Jason. And also a really fun moment that's probably my favorite part of the movie is when Jensen Daggett and Scott Reeves, who's the male lead, when they get to New York, when they're in Times Square, they see Jason, and Jason starts walking after them. They run past this group of street thugs listening to their boombox, and then Jason just comes up walking and just casually just kicks the boombox and pisses off the street thugs, like, "You're dead meat, slimehead!" And then Jason just turns back at them and lifts his mask up and shows his face, and they're like, "No, man, no, it's cool, man, it's cool," and they run off. And I thought that's like a really fun moment. That gave me a chuckle. So there's moments like that that are really fun, that make this film a pretty decent flick. But it's just not as good as, like, you know, Part 4, Part 6, or Part 3, or Part 2, and things like that. But I think it's a decent installment. It's just like, you know, sadly they couldn't really film too much in New York, so that was kind of sad. Because I really would have liked to have seen, with a little bit more of a bigger budget, them being able to do stuff in New York. Times, you know, Madison Square Garden, and things like that. I really would have been cool to see those kind of scenes, but sadly that wasn't the case. But decent installment of the franchise. And so there you have it. That's pretty much it for my review for Jason Takes Manhattan. And thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you guys next time. You guys take care.